Have you ever felt that, no matter how hard you try, your emotions end up being controlled by the actions of others? Perhaps a snide comment at work, a critical look from family, or even a subtle provocation from friends makes your heart race and your confidence waver. This feeling of insecurity, when left unaddressed, transforms ordinary situations into internal storms. But what if I told you it's possible to regain control, take a deep breath, and choose how to react, even in the face of external pressure? In this guide, you will discover techniques inspired by Stoicism that teach you how to transform judgments and provocations into simple information, without letting them disturb your peace. Prepare to look inward, strengthen your confidence, and realize that true emotional freedom depends on no one but yourself. Throughout this practical method, we will explore strategies for observing without absorbing, pausing before acting, neutralizing insults, seeing the other as a distorted mirror, and finally, using silence as a form of inner superiority. This is not about coldness or indifference, but about gaining real security, capable of withstanding life's challenges and the insecurity we often try to hide. With each technique applied, you will realize how small changes in perspective have the power to completely transform your relationship with the world and with yourself. If you are ready to take the helm of your emotions and stop being a hostage to external instability, this is the time to begin. And most importantly, this path doesn't require superhuman strength or inaccessible skills. It requires attention, practice, and conscious decision-making. Each step you take strengthens self-control, resilience, and tranquility in the face of others' judgment. In the end, the promise is not just to survive criticism and provocation, but to live with security, confidence, and emotional freedom, becoming a master of your own reactions. What you are about to learn is not distant theory. It's a practical guide to transforming insecurity into silent power and lasting inner peace. When we give in to the impulse to respond to a provocation, we are, in fact, surrendering the control that belongs to us. That snide comment, the critical look, or the subtle criticism may provoke us, but if we react automatically, insecurity manifests itself as if we needed to prove something to someone. The impulsive reaction is like throwing gasoline on an existing flame. Instead of extinguishing it, we spread the fire. Observing this is the first step in realizing that our peace doesn't need to depend on others. Accepting that the world will always have judgments and criticisms doesn't weaken us. On the contrary, it gives us the freedom to choose our responses. Control lies in the pause, in the ability not to be dragged along, to keep our center firm even in the face of provocation. By realizing this, we begin to differentiate what truly deserves our energy from what is merely external noise. Reacting without reflection creates an endless cycle. The more we try to extinguish the external fire, the more insecure we feel internally. Insecurity is treacherous, subtle, and appears precisely when we believe that our authority, value, or image depends on the gaze of others. A simple insult, however small, finds fertile ground if we cultivate this need for validation. But the secret is understanding that it is not the provocation that defines us, but rather our ability to maintain control over our own minds. This does not mean becoming cold or insensitive. It means recognizing that the immediate reaction is almost always a surrender of power. We can train attentive observation, identify the trigger, and choose to act intelligently, not emotionally. With practice, the reaction ceases to be automatic and becomes a conscious choice. Imagine a typical day at work or with family. Someone makes a hurtful comment, and your first reaction is to retaliate. This impulse reflects the insecurity within you, that feeling that you need to defend yourself or justify yourself. But if you pause, breathe, and observe, you realize that the situation doesn't warrant the response your anxiety wants to give. Control returns to your hands, and a sense of personal power grows, silently, almost invisibly. Self-awareness strengthens, and with it, confidence. You don't need to prove anything, neither to the other person nor to yourself. Each small victory against the impulse is a brick in the construction of inner security. And it is precisely this learning that prepares us to deal with the world without losing our peace. The external world is like a blank canvas. It doesn't carry its own intentions. It only reflects what we project onto it. When someone criticizes us or looks at us askance, the first reaction of insecurity is to feel attacked. But, as the Stoics teach, it's not the fact itself that disturbs us, but rather the judgment we make of it. Each situation becomes meaningful only when we decide to interpret it in that way. Observing this is liberating because it reveals that our inner value doesn't depend on the gaze of others. A harsh comment doesn't have to be a judgment on who we are. It can simply be the projection of another person's limited perspective. Accepting this neutrality gives us the key to living with more lightness and less anxiety. When we begin to see reality as neutral, we realize that insecurity stems from the confusion between the external and the internal. What happens outside doesn't define who we are. It's merely raw material for our choices and reactions. The feeling of urgency to respond, prove, or justify is nothing more than a reflection of how we still depend on the judgment of others. Control returns to our hands when we understand that we can choose the meaning of situations. Instead of reacting defensively, we can observe, analyze, and decide, does this matter, or is it just noise? This constant practice strengthens self-control and reduces emotional vulnerability. A practical example: imagine receiving criticism at work. The first inclination is to feel the weight of someone else's opinion, as if it determined our worth. But by applying the Stoic perspective, you pause, breathe, and observe the criticism as neutral data without judging yourself. Ask yourself, is this useful for my growth, or is it just noise? From this choice, you decide whether to incorporate the information, ignore it, or transform it into learning. Every time we practice this distinction between the external and the internal, insecurity loses ground. The world continues with its provocations and judgments, but now our internal control becomes the true reference point. Step 1. Observe without absorbing. The drama of others only affects us when we decide to make it our own. Insecurity appears strongly precisely when we are porous, allowing external emotions to penetrate and dominate us. Observing without absorbing means creating an invisible barrier between what belongs to the other and what belongs to us. It is not contempt or indifference. It is awareness that each person carries their own battles, and we are not responsible for all of them. By adopting this posture, we learn to react more calmly, without the external world dictating our peace. A critical look or a provocative comment becomes just information, without emotional weight. With practice, this observation becomes a natural habit, strengthening our inner resilience. In practice, observing without absorbing requires full attention. When someone provokes us, we can observe what is happening without letting feelings of insecurity overwhelm us. It's like watching a storm through a window. We feel the force of the wind and rain, but we remain dry inside. This conscious detachment allows our reaction to be calculated, not reflexive. Insecurity tries to push us toward immediate defense, but self-control manifests itself precisely in this space of observation. Every time we manage to separate what is ours from what belongs to others, we grow emotionally and strengthen our inner confidence. A simple exercise is to pay attention to triggers. What kind of comment, look, or situation usually affects you? By identifying these points, we can train ourselves to observe before reacting. Instead of absorbing the drama, we allow it to exist without deeply affecting us. A coworker, a family member, or even a stranger can trigger feelings of insecurity, but the barrier of awareness protects our stability. Observing without absorbing doesn't mean disconnecting from the world. It means choosing where to place our energy and attention. Gradually, this practice teaches us that our peace is independent of external storms, creating a solid foundation of self-control and serenity. Step 2. Pause is your power. Between impulse and action lies a precious space, and whoever masters this interval masters themselves. Insecurity often pushes us toward an immediate response, as if silence were a sign of weakness. But the truth is quite the opposite. The pause is where the power resides. Breathing, observing, and allowing the emotion to stabilize before acting gives us clarity and control. It is in this instant that the choice ceases to be a reflex and becomes a conscious decision. An irritating comment or provocation ceases to drag us down when we understand that we can respond with self-control. This small interval transforms our energy, and little by little, the impulsive reaction gives way to wisdom. Practicing pausing requires training, especially in high-pressure situations. Instead of reacting immediately, try counting to 5 mentally or taking a deep breath before speaking or acting. This simple technique creates distance between the initial emotion and the subsequent action, allowing judgment not to be dominated by impulse. Insecurity wants silence to be interpreted as weakness, but in reality, it is an expression of inner strength. Each time we manage to pause, confidence increases because we begin to realize that we don't need to react to prove our worth. Over time, pausing becomes a natural reflex, no longer a conscious effort. Imagine a family argument or a tense work situation. The tendency is to speak first to defend or justify yourself. By incorporating a pause, you observe the situation, feel the emotion, and only then choose the appropriate response. This practice strengthens self-control and reduces the impact of provocations, rendering insults ineffective. Insecurity, which previously dictated automatic responses, loses power, and conscious decision-making begins to guide your actions. Learning to pause is like finding the emotional reset button. Each moment of strategic silence increases the feeling of self-mastery. With this, power ceases to reside in the other person and returns to your own hands. Step 3. The insult only works when it finds an internal weakness. An insult only hurts us when, deep down, we believe it. Insecurity creates fissures through which any word enters and echoes, transforming a seemingly small comment into an emotional earthquake. When we are clear about who we are, these criticisms lose their power because they don't fit the inner truth we carry. It's as if someone tried to hit us with an arrow that simply ricochets without touching us. Realizing this gives us freedom. Insults have no inherent power, only the power we grant them. Every time we recognize our own integrity, we strengthen our confidence and learn not to let ourselves be manipulated by external provocations. Awareness of one's own worth is the most effective defense against verbal attacks. In practice, when someone says something offensive, the first reaction of insecurity is to feel diminished or to try to justify oneself. But by observing and reflecting, we can identify that the other person's words are not about us, but about the limited perception of the person who uttered them. It's a distorted mirror, as if they were trying to show us something that doesn't exist. Recognizing this allows us to respond with self-control or even remain silent, without the comment affecting us. This posture creates a safe inner space, in which our self-esteem and tranquility remain intact. The more we practice, the less our peace depends on external approval. A helpful exercise is to imagine each insult as a foreign object trying to fit into your life. If it doesn't fit your inner truth, it simply has no effect. For example, someone criticizes your work or your appearance. If you know your worth and your capabilities, the criticism becomes mere noise. Insecurity will still try to create openings, but with attention and practice, you learn not to open doors for it. Each time the insult hits and finds no inner echo, confidence grows silently. Thus, we transform potentially painful experiences into opportunities to strengthen resilience and maintain serenity. Step 4. The other is just a dirty mirror. When someone attacks us, they often reveal more about themselves than about us. Insecurity makes us seek validation in the reflection that the other person projects, as if each critical look were a thermometer of our own worth. But when we understand that the mirror is dirty or distorted, we stop seeing ourselves in it. A harsh comment, an unfair criticism, or a harsh judgment doesn't say who we are. It only reflects the confusion, fear, or frustration of the other person. Recognizing this returns control to ourselves, allowing the opinion of others to be merely information, not a judgment. Emotional freedom begins when we learn to ignore the distorted reflection and focus on our own inner image. It is at this moment that personal security begins to silently blossom. Looking at others as a dirty mirror doesn't mean disrespecting or becoming indifferent. It means understanding the nature of projection. Every time we allow ourselves to be influenced, we give power to an unreliable reflection. When insecurity drives us to react, we forget that our self-perception must come from within. The practice consists of realizing that external judgment is fleeting, changeable, and often biased. If we learn to value our own inner gaze, we can walk through the world with confidence, without being held hostage by the criticism of others. This exercise allows us to strengthen self-awareness and reduce emotional dependence on others. A practical example: when receiving unfair criticism at work, take a breath and ask yourself, does this opinion truly reflect my competence or just the limitations of the person who uttered it? By adopting this perspective, you transform the dirty mirror into an opportunity for self-awareness, instead of a source of insecurity. Perception becomes selective. What matters is what you see in yourself, not the distorted reflection of the other person. The more we practice this observation, the less we react, the more we control our emotions, and the more we strengthen our inner peace. The mirror of the other ceases to be a threat and becomes merely an external curiosity, without power over you. Step 5. Silence is a form of inner superiority. Responding immediately isn't always a sign of strength. Often it reveals a dependence on the approval of others. Insecurity demands that we prove our worth, that we defend our point at all costs, but strategic silence is a sign of self-control and emotional maturity. Remaining calm in the face of provocation shows that our equilibrium doesn't depend on others. When we master the art of silence, the reaction becomes conscious, not reflexive. It's like holding the rudder during a storm. We don't need to fight the waves, just maintain direction. This posture strengthens confidence and teaches that winning isn't always about convincing others, but about maintaining one's own peace. Silence, in this context, is a subtle and secure gesture of power. In practice, applying silence requires awareness. In a discussion, instead of immediately responding to criticism or provocation, we can simply observe, breathe, and decide if intervention is truly necessary. Often, a pause speaks louder than any word. It conveys confidence and security effortlessly. Insecurity, which seeks quick answers, is frustrated by a calmness that doesn't need approval. Over time, this practice becomes natural. Realizing that we don't need to react to assert inner value transforms how we interact with the world. Silence ceases to be absence and becomes a strong and conscious presence. An everyday example: imagine someone at work trying to provoke you in a meeting. The first reaction of insecurity is to retort to show competence or strength. But if you remain silent, listening attentively, observing the other person's behavior and maintaining composure, you reveal inner superiority. Every word spoken impulsively would fuel the conflict. Every pause, on the other hand, reinforces self-control. Strategic silence protects confidence, minimizes the impact of others' judgment, and strengthens the feeling of emotional freedom. Thus, the art of not reacting becomes a silent shield against insecurity and manipulation. The goal of the Stoic method is not to become insensitive or distant, but to achieve emotional freedom. It's not about ignoring feelings, but about not letting them dominate you, especially the impulses generated by insecurity. When we learn to observe, pause, and realize that the judgment of others does not define our worth, we free ourselves from automatic reactivity. True strength lies in choosing our responses and cultivating inner peace even in the face of provocation. Self-control is not coldness. It is awareness. The more we practice this, the further we move away from the need for external approval and the more we strengthen our self-confidence. Emotional freedom allows us to live peacefully, regardless of external storms. In practical life, Stoic philosophy translates into simple actions. Breathe before reacting, reflect before responding, and choose our battles wisely. Insecurity tries to push us into conflict, to prove our worth or settle scores, but Stoic practice teaches us that our peace is worth more than any argument. Every challenging situation is an opportunity to strengthen resilience and self-control. By understanding that the external world is neutral and that the other is merely a mirror, we learn to filter stimuli and act according to internal principles. This seemingly small daily practice builds solid and lasting security. Imagine life as a mighty river. Emotions, criticism, and challenges are currents that try to sweep us away. The Stoic method is like learning to swim with confidence, remaining steady despite the force of the water. Each technique, observing without absorbing, pausing, understanding the power of silence, recognizing the dirty mirror, is a tool that strengthens our emotional center. Insecurity loses ground when we realize we can choose our reaction and preserve our balance. By applying these principles, we develop not only resilience but also serenity and inner clarity. It is true emotional liberation, allowing us to live whole, independent, and at peace. Now that you've come this far, it's time to reflect. How many times have you allowed someone else's opinion or attitude to define your mood, your decisions, or even your worth? Each technique presented, observing without absorbing, pausing, understanding the power of silence, perceiving insults as a reflection of the other, is an invitation to regain control of your emotional life. Ask yourself, am I letting insecurity dictate my responses, or am I choosing to act with awareness and freedom? Real change happens when we move from reflection to action. In the coming days, try practicing at least one of these steps in everyday situations. Breathe before responding, observe without absorbing, or simply remain silent in the face of a provocative comment. Notice how each small victory strengthens your confidence and reduces the need for external validation. Consistent practice transforms self-control into a habit and emotional freedom into a tangible reality. If you want to continue growing and improving your inner security, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and follow content that will help you develop resilience, serenity, and mastery of your own emotions. Every step taken in the practice of Stoicism is a step towards emotional independence, and you are only beginning to realize the power that already resides within you.